Welcome, everybody. I'm going to wait for a few more people to go ahead and join before we get started. Probably going to give it about just maybe one more minute. Then we'll start going over some some like behavioral interview questions. That's kind of like the goal today. I know we've been covering like a lot of technical things, how to ramp up our technical skills. But one thing we want to also cover is like how to actually get past like the final round of interviews. That's something that a lot of candidates struggle with is they have like the technical aspect down, but like those behavioral questions, tell me about yourself, the star responses, that's sometimes when we can freeze up. And it's just as important as passing that technical part. So um, all right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So the first question that I really want to talk about, and that I've been in over probably 200 interviews in my career so far, and every interview has started with like a "tell me about yourself" question, and that's probably the most overlooked and yet important question to start an interview. Like, because first impressions are everything. At the end of the day, we're humans. Sometimes we can be unforgiving, and so if you start out the interview on the wrong foot, that can affect your confidence, that can affect the flow and the rest of the interview. If you establish rapport with your interviewer in the beginning, start out with like finding some common ground, maybe a joke. That's something I've found really good use in, just like finding common ground in the beginning of an interview. This could be like you joining the call 5-10 minutes before, showing them that you're always on time. These small things seem insignificant, but they go a long way in just showing people how much you care about working at this company. But going into the actual questions that we're going to talk about, the first one is, tell me about yourself. And I like to break this down into what we call the three S's. So the first one is my strength is, or my greatest quality is. You want to start out with like what you highlight in, like what you bring to the table. So let's say if I'm I'm good with working with people, I'm good at listening to people, I could say, hey, I've had a career in solution consulting, I've worked at ServiceNow, I've worked at CodeRabbit, I've worked at this industry, and I've helped this amount of customers, reduce the amount of you know, etc. by this number, because you definitely want to give specific numbers, and that shows the impact that you made. And even if it's not at a company, it could be through a project, it could be through community work, it could be through you doing like an open source project. That's definitely something I recommend, is doing some open source projects, trying to get your hands in a lot of things that people are working on right now, because that will get other people's attention, and that gives you what I like to call ammo of what you can bring into an interview. So this is something we can cover later, but today we're just going to focus on the behavioral aspect. But you definitely want to start with like what your strength is, what's your superpower, and everybody has a superpower. I know some of you might not realize it yet. We're gonna do we're gonna try to do a good job of helping people realize what their superpower is in this cohort. But I would take some time tonight, this week, think about what your strength is and what you can bring to a company, even outside of your technical ability, because everybody is trying to get into tech right now. Like, let's shift our mind on that. Everybody wants to break into tech. Everybody wants a high paying salary. Everybody wants to have the cool title. But what else? Like, what else do you bring to a table? And so that's like the number one thing. That's you should start with your strength. The second S. So remember, there's three S's. This is the formula for the "Tell me about yourself" question, and I highly recommend you guys write this down, take notes, and practice in front of a mirror. These three S's. Your response should be no longer. Well, if somebody was to ask you, "Tell me about yourself," I would keep it no longer than a minute, maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes. And so we covered the first S. Second S is success. Like, what have you found success in so far in your career? So this could be whether you worked at a. My apologies if you hear birds and stuff out of the background. I'm in nature right now, if you couldn't tell. But the second S is success. So where have you found success in your career so far? That could be, again, at a company. That could be serving in your community. That could be through a project. That could be through an open source project. But you want to talk about the success and the value you bring to a company. And so I think I kind of tangled up that into the first one. And it's okay if if they mesh somehow. In fact, it should have a flow in some type of way. So if some way you talk about your strength and success in the same sentence or in the same, you know, I guess response, that's totally fine. But you kind of want to do it in a flow where you mention like your strength, and you bridge that into the success, which highlights your strength, and it shows tangible numbers that are objective. You don't want it to be from your perspective. You want to think about, all out of all the projects I've done, out of all the companies I've worked at, out of all of the communities I've served in, what is the impact I've had on them? Think about it from their perspective. How have they seen your value? And this is might be a good opportunity to you to reach out to people who you maybe have worked with, coworkers, some colleagues who you maybe went to college with. Maybe you collaborated on a few projects, and sometimes we don't see these things in ourselves. And you can reach out to other people and say, "Hey, like, I'm just curious, like, what would you say my strength is? Like, I'm kind of trying to think of like what I could bring to the table with this company. What are like some strengths you see in me?" And people could say, "Hey, yeah, I think you're a good listener. You're really empathetic. You showed people that you care. You're passionate." Those are strengths that not everyone brings to the table. I just want to let you guys know, you being charismatic, you showing that you're excited, you having a lively personality, that separates you from a lot of other candidates in tech. And I'm not trying to, you know, I'm not trying to bring down the introverts or people who aren't as social, but people want to be around people who are fun to be around. People want to be around sociable people, especially if you're doing this for 5 years at a company. People want to be around people who are, you know, are almost like fountains. They pour out, they give, they have an energy about them that is almost infectious. So that's one thing I just want to highlight as well with the tone that you have during these interviews. You want to have like show them that you woke up today excited about being here, and that you care about the company. I know I'm kind of ping ponging back and forth. This is kind of not a freestyling. We definitely have an itinerary today, but I just want to share some ins and outs, like the things that I've learned over. I've been told no lots of times, so I know how to not to get an interview. I know how not to get a job, and I know how to get a job. So I'm gonna share both experiences with you guys. And the interviews where I've been successful, I've showed up on time, mostly early. I've shown that I did my research about the company beforehand. So every interview that you have, you should, like Batman. What's Batman's greatest strength? It's his preparation. Batman's always prepared. He always has a plan. He always has a plan B. He always has a plan C, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to come into every interview prepared for possible questions. You want to research that company as if you work there already. You know, find out their SWOTs. So SWOTs are strengths, weaknesses, opportunities for growth, and T is essentially like other competitors. I forget the actual. Somebody can help me out here. I'm sure in the chat, or the T is essentially like what are other threats. That's what it is. Threats. Yeah. So what are other threats, or what are other companies who are in their sector that are competing with them at the moment? And so, like for example, if I'm let's say I'm in AI right now. So if I'm working at OpenAI right now, a threat would be Anthropic. Another threat would be, I wouldn't say like, and yeah, it's really kind of just them two, depending on how you see it. But you guys get what I'm saying. You want to definitely like highlight make sure the company understands that you know what you're getting yourself into, and that you've done your research on them. Getting back to the three S's, I know I got track of that. So strengths, success, and then situation, because you don't want to make it like this is kind of like a first date. So when you're on a first date, you don't want to you don't want to just ask them questions and show that you're all about them. You want to see if you want to work there too. You want to see if you want to be in a relationship with that person as well. It's not just about them, it's also about you. And when you show people that you value yourself, they will no less than you see yourself, if that makes sense. Like if you carry yourself in a certain standard, if you show that you carry yourself to a certain degree, they will meet you at that level. And so with that third S is a situation, which means I'm looking for a situation blank. Like tell them what you're looking for, tell them what type of company you want to work at, tell them what type of people, what type of community you've really thrive in. If you like to work in powwows, if you like to do paired programming, if you like to collaborate with people, let companies know that, because it shows you're a team player. And I've been in, I haven't worked in too many jobs. I've had maybe 5, 6 different jobs in my career. I haven't worked in one job where I'm just working by myself and just like not having to talk to people. So people want to know if you're a team player. They want to know if you can communicate with other people. People want to know, like, are you fun to be around? Can you listen? These are things that the interviewer, they care about your technical ability. They care about, you passing the data structures and algorithms interview. But these things I'm bringing up are just as valuable, if not more, as the technical aspect, because the technical aspect is objective. Like it's a math. You either got it right or you didn't. You know, it's kind of like yes or no. But with the behavioral interview, it's like you and I. Like I can't see you guys right now, but you know, it's like a human thing. And you might meet some people who don't like you. You're gonna meet some people who do like you, and you just want to make sure you do your homework and you put all the steps in place to make it hard for them to say no about you. So again, that third S is a situation. I'm looking for a situation where I can work with other people. I can collaborate. I want to be in a situation where I can share ideas. I want to have full autonomy over my work. I take pride in my work. I'm a self-starter. I'm hungry. I really want to break into this field because I've had a lot of experience doing XYZ. So I know And what I can do is I can provide over like some examples of things that I use, like a script that I've used in the past, and like shared in Discord. That way, you guys have like a, you know, I know I've given you guys the formula, but like some examples of like things you could use from my playbook that I've found a lot of success in. But again, we've only been on this first question. Tell me about yourself, and I can guarantee you, in every interview, you will be asked that question. If not, I will reach out to me and I will compensate you in some way because they want to know who they're interviewing. You know, so again, it's like it's a date. You're not gonna get in their interview and they're gonna say, okay, let's start the interview. Let's go ahead and start the coding questions now. They're gonna ask you questions. They're gonna ask how your day's going. They're gonna see how you respond. Of course, they want to measure like the important part, like that technical part. I'm not gonna undermine that part, but you know this is when they ask you these questions, and this is some things I've seen people kind of go left, and this is I'm going to shift the conversation to talk about where I see people kind of miss the mark here. When people ask you, tell me about yourself, don't tell them, hey, yeah, I like to play video. I mean, you could, depending who you're talking to, and depending on the type of job you're interviewing at, but don't say, hey, I like to play Call of Duty. I like to go hang out at the beach with my friends. This is cool stuff, but we're talking about corporate America here. We're serious people here, and I'm gonna be honest with you, like that's kind of like letting them know, like if you talk about those things, they're gonna see you in that way. So if you highlight hobbies, if you highlight fun, if you highlight even things like, hey, I like to go do this, I like to go do that. If you're not talking about the value you can bring to them, they're just going to see you as like a fun person. And fun people are cool to like hang out with, fun to go to the park with. But if you're talking about getting an interview, getting a job, they want to see what's in it for us. What are we going to get out of hiring you? Because like they're going to have to come up with a compensation package for you, medical benefits, dental benefits. They're basically going to vouch for leadership to hire you, and they're going to have to say, this person did this at this company, they brought these numbers to that company, they showed that they can do it there, and I'm positive they can do that for us. That's pretty much how it goes. And so I highly recommend, even though I don't want to sound like a downer here, but I would steer away from talking about yourself. It sounds, even though they're asking me, tell me about yourself, don't tell them about yourself. In fact, keep that, keep the slog to a minimum, because silence, you keeping your responses as small and as concise as possible shows experience and it shows wisdom. Believe it or not. I know sometimes we think if we elaborate, if we explain ourselves, if we go into detail, that we're explaining ourselves, but it actually does the opposite. It shows sometimes that, oh, you're trying to over explain. It shows you not be as confident as the interviewer thinks you are. And you could be confident, you could be going into detail, but to be honest with you, a lot of interviewers, they're not, the highlight of their day isn't interviewing you. I hate to break it to you guys, but they're thinking about their son's soccer practice after this. They're thinking about going to their daughter's basketball game after this interview. So the last thing they're looking forward to, and this is just me telling you guys the real of this corporate world. They're show them, make them remember you in that interview. It's honestly probably the last thing they're looking forward to in the day. I've interviewed people in the past. It's not something I look forward to. I'm not getting on a call, saying, oh, I'm looking forward to meeting this person. Like, unless I headhunted that person. And right now, all of us on this call, we're trying to break into tech. We're grinding, we're studying, we're putting in the work, but these employers, they don't necessarily see us as the way we see ourselves yet. But so we have to carry ourselves at a standard in the way that we talk, we present ourselves, that lets them know that, hey, I'm serious too. And so that's just another thing, is like, practice these responses in the mirror. That's how you get good at it. Like Stephen Curry, he's the best shooter of all time. and he still misses 50% of his shots. Kobe, as great as we see him, he has the most missed shots of all time, and he puts up, he put up all the shots in the world. Like he put in all the work just to miss the most shots of all time. So you're gonna see a lot of, I'm gonna be honest, you're gonna see like a lot of messes up in the mirror. You might stumble over your words at first, but that shows that you're building that muscle memory of like how to actually, you know, begin to talk about yourself and keep your responses concise, keep them sharp, and that will go a long way for interviewers. So we're done with the tell me about yourself question. I know I stayed on that for a minute, but I wanted to give you guys some extra like, some like wisdom, some extra knowledge of what interviewers are thinking in the interview. And like sometimes these are things people don't talk about. I know a lot of it has been technical so far in the cohort, but like these are like those small things that I only was able to learn from experience. Nobody taught me any of the things that I'm telling you guys today. And it hurt a lot to like receive a lot of rejections. Like I've been told no probably over 200 times in interviews, and I had to go back to the drawing board. I had to, think like, man, what am I doing wrong? Because I kept seeing the same results. I kept seeing the same results. Kept being told no. I kept being told no. Technical interviews, all that was already. I was getting to the third, fourth, fifth interviews consistently every time, but when it came to like those final rounds, I couldn't get past those, and I had to really look in the mirror and start to practice like these questions, and that's really when I started to see success. So um, the second question is, you know, people want to see how you handle confrontation, and they want to see how you handle messing up, especially um, one, if you messed up, and two, if somebody else messed up. A, how did you respond to that? Or two, how did you help them? Because a lot of like working at a startup or even like at, a company like Google, Meta, all these companies is you want to be like especially if you want to level up, you want to be a leader. You don't want to always be a person who has to be told what to do. You want to be a self-starter and a person that, creates initiatives, a person that, hey, I see this is missing here. Let me go ahead and get that started. Let me go ahead and take the initiative to solve that. And so with that, they're going to ask you, hey, tell me about a time where something, you know, something broke in maybe in production or something. They're going to wrap it around a technical in a technical way. But tell me about a time where something went wrong. What did you do, and like really like what was the outcome of that result? And so that's, I would say, in about 70, probably 60 to 70% of interviews, I've been told that question, or I've been asked that question. And again, this is like it's a formulated question, so you need a formulated response. Like before interviews these interviewers are asking, they're not just asking you these questions, they're asking, candidate A, candidate B, candidate C, candidate Z, all those different candidates the same question, and they're measuring you guys against each other. And ideally, it's not fair. I'm gonna be honest with you, it's not fair. They're comparing you with somebody else, and how you answer it, that's how they're gonna determine your value. And ideally, that's not how it should be in this world. But when it comes to business, when it comes to like corporate America, that's just the way it is. And so again, they're asking you formulated questions. They're going to go down a list of questions that they got from Chat GPT that they Googled. They put in no effort into pulling these questions, but they're still going to have a question bank. They're going to go through these. They're going to go through all a bunch of candidates, and they're going to rank your answers by, hey, this candidate had a structured response. They were confident. They let me know what happened. They said, I was in this, environment. And basically, like what I'm getting here is like a STAR response. I'm sure all of you have heard that before. STAR is S is situation. Like, what was the situation that was confrontation or the conflict? Something broke in production. Um, a coworker might have, opposed one of your new initiatives to add like a new feature, etc. Like, what was the situation? The T is the task. So, really, like, what was the task at hand? Like, what did you have to do during this time? So the task is ideally, hey, like, I was building out, a new API that enforced auth and tenant scoping, but during the building process, something broke, and you know that's basically like the task. So what were you doing? And the situation is kind of like the higher level context of that task, if that makes sense. So the task is more like, exactly what you're doing. The situation is you kind of like bringing your interviewer into like the story itself. So you kind of don't want to just say like, oh yeah, I fixed this and I did that and then I did this. You want to actually want to give context of like, okay, what was happening? What was the impact of this? Who was affected by this? What was, kind of like, tell a story, and that will bring people in. I encourage you all to learn the art of storytelling. That's probably going to be one of the best skills you learn in your careers, because, you know, everybody loves a good story. Sometimes we sit around campfires just to listen to a good story. I know that's kind of corny, but everybody, especially in corporate America, everybody loves a good story. So S is situation, T is task, A is assess. So like, bring them into your mind of like, how did you assess this situation? Like, what was going on into your head that helped you get to the end goal? And we'll cover the last one next. But the A is also very important because it shows them how you process things. It shows them how you think. You don't want to just say, I did this, that. You want to talk about edge cases in your head. You want to show them, well, at first, before I tackle this problem, I wanted to make sure I understood all the different, business context, all the different edge cases of this problem before I even, tackle this problem. And you can go through like the details of that business context. Hey, yeah, like we had 500 people, using this system. It was, you know, I mean, I don't want to give too much of a reply that's not going to be applicable to you guys, but I'm sure you guys can think of some things, and I'll give again another like example through Discord. But A is you bringing them into your mind, and like, how did you think about this situation, and R is the result. So what was the result of this? And the result isn't I'm not going to make it sound like it's like the finale and that's like the most important one, but we want to stay objective and we want to focus on tangible outcomes. So you don't want to say the result from your perspective. You don't want to say, I felt like it, or at the end, I did, I made sure that it did this. You want to get out of your perspective, and you want to look at it from the person that you helped, or from the company's perspective. Like, what was the company's benefit of you assessing this and you tackling this problem? That's definitely, when you show like companies that you can get out of your own mind and you can think of things from other people's perspectives, that will help them. Again, that's you being a fountain. That's you pouring out your value onto other people. It's not you being I use this analogy a lot. You have sinks and you have fountains. Fountains pour out water, sinks drain water. Sinks and companies are people who they usually need to always be told what to do. They're good at doing tasks. They listen. They receive. Sinks receive, but they're draining. you know again, I know sometimes like the things that I say can be a little harsh, but I want everybody in this call to kind of get out of this, like, be a fountain. Be that person who, when you come into the interview, they remember you after the interview. Like, you pour out, like, almost like the things that you talk about, like they can't deny your value, because you're giving tangible outcomes. You're not giving subjective outcomes. You're not giving things from your perspective of what you thought went well. You're saying, at this company, I did this, and this is the number that represents that. And within those star responses, you're not saying, oh, I did this, I did that, and at the end, I felt like, at the end, everybody was happy. You want to say, is again star STA, and then at the end, it produced this amount of ROI for this project or for this company. So that's another thing I want to highlight is speak in numbers. Like, I'm a big basketball fan. One of the Warriors, Golden State Warriors slogans is strength in numbers. So when you're talking about outcome, when you're talking about your value, tie your value to numbers of how that value was actually realized from somebody else's perspective, if that makes sense. So like, again, like if somebody saw the value in that, or if a company received your value, tie that to a number, whether that's the amount of people, and this is important too, whether that's the amount of people, whether that's amount of money, and that's the big one. Who doesn't love money? Tie that to the amount of money that was saved, tie that to the amount of time that was saved, or I would say those are the three main ones. Those are all three tangible things that everybody cares about. Companies, they hire people, unless they're hiring AI agents at the time, but we won't go into that. They hire people. Companies, they need to make money, and companies value time. So if you can, in all these questions so far, we've covered two with the tell me about yourself, and with tell me about a time where you encountered a situation where something went wrong. In those three responses, I mean, in those two questions, think about people, money, and time in terms of your value. Like, how is your value tied into people, money, and time? If you can stay on those, people will not be able to not deny your value, because those are objective things, in a lot of ways. And um, I do want to go over some more questions. I know I don't want to overwhelm us with too much here. We're going to be doing this pretty much on a regular basis. So I definitely encourage you guys, next time or in Discord to come with questions. I'll try to answer some questions like in the Discord that I see after this, but trying to make sure, with the some other questions that we cover, that they're like actually gonna be like, you're gonna see them a lot, because I mean, you're gonna see some unique questions on interviews. There are gonna be some questions that are specific to certain companies and specific to certain roles. So again, when going into any interview, you definitely want to look on, Reddit, look on Glassdoor, go on YouTube, do your research, because again, like if you can find other people who've been in your shoes and who've been in that interview process before, they might tell you what they're going to ask you, and that really saves you a lot of time. Um, one of my like my favorite, if you guys haven't been able to tell by now, I love analogies. You know, smart people learn from their own mistakes. Wise people learn from other people's mistakes. So take the time to learn from other people's mistakes and learn from other people's success. And that will accelerate your career, because you won't make the same mistakes other people made, because they made them already for you. You know, like what if they tell you, hey, I messed up doing this, I messed up doing that, you know, don't do those things. And you won't see those same mistakes, because where I messed up was I used to always talk about myself in interviews. I used to say, oh yeah, I mean, I'm a big nature person, if you couldn't tell. You know, I used to talk about, hey, I love being in nature. I love, you know, going on walks. I love being active. I love camping. And there's nothing wrong with those things, but they're not hiring, the crocodile hunter, They're not hiring a nature guy. They want to hire somebody who's going to bring value to a company. And this is me talking about where I went wrong in all of my interviews. I used to tell, yeah, like, I love basketball. I love doing this. I love, I would talk about like, other things as well when they would ask me, tell me about myself. But I didn't have my mind around like them. I wasn't thinking about them when they asked me, tell me about myself, which is kind of ironic, but it's a trick question when they ask you that. It's a trick question when they ask you that. So I just want you guys to remember that. Um, but yeah, going back to the research and like asking like Reddit, um, Glassdoor, go on LinkedIn. Again, like Batman is always prepared. I think that's one thing that I've always realized, that when I'm prepared going into interviews, confidence you know, preparation breeds confidence, and confidence breeds success. And in order to be confident, you have to prepare. So if you go into interviews, like as I told you all this stuff so far with, these two questions, we're going to go over more. But if you go into an interview just with this knowledge, just as I told you, you're you're not going to see any success from that. Just because like you have to glow, you have to mess up, you have to practice this in the mirror, and you have to do it a lot of times. And you know, as much as you do it, is as good as you're going to be at it. As just it's with anything in life. Like I'm sure when you guys first started riding as a kid, you guys weren't riding a bike, right? You had to practice, you had to fall down a few times. When you guys first, started playing Call of Duty, I'm pretty sure your friends used to, you know, I was terrible at Halo, at Call of Duty. I had to practice to become good because I was tired of them always talking trash to me. So just like anything else in life, you have to practice these behavioral questions the same way you're practicing these technical questions. Um, so yeah, let's get into some more questions that I believe have been asked a lot of times on interviews. I would say so. Tell me about a time something went wrong. Um, I think another common one, and it kind of ties into that first "tell me about yourself" question, is it's kind of like they're gonna ask you about tell me about like what type of like situation you're looking for, or almost like what's like what are you looking for in your next role. Like what's your ideal situation. I know we've covered that in the first star response, but this is kind of like it's its own question in some type of way, and this is where that preparation is going to help you. You want to When they ask you that question, you have already done the research on that company, because you remember those SWOTs, as I mentioned earlier in the stream. That company has their own strengths. As we have our own strengths, that company has their own strengths. How we have our own weaknesses, that company has their own weaknesses. And so when they ask you, tell me about like what type, like what are you looking for in your next role, you wanna you wanna answer it according to their SWOTs. So this is again, you did the research already on their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities for growth, and threats. When they ask you that question, throw it back at them and say, I'm looking for a company with a strength in this. And that strength is something that you've researched about that company. I feel like I can help a company in this way because I've realized in this industry, this is lacking right now. And that answer resolves to the weakness. So like right now, I work at an AI company, and I'm talking about myself. And right now, everybody is really starting to get an AI code review, because a lot of these code gen tools are starting to produce massive PRs where it's humanly impossible to read 10,000 line PRs. So with my company, we help we provide an agent where you can review code, and we bring your code into our harness, which provides guardrails around like sensitive customer information. If you have like governance and compliance standards with healthcare companies, fintech companies, we can provide a harness around their code, so that way sensitive customer information isn't leaked into production. Because AI can hallucinate, AI can produce bad code the same way humans can. So with AI companies, a strong weakness right now is governance and compliance. And I highly recommend you guys to take notes on this, um, not just on AI companies, but like any industry that you're interested in. Look at like that industry's weakness, because right now in AI, the weakness is governance and compliance. Companies are producing massive PRs. Like they're using code gen tools to produce. They're shipping features faster than ever. I mean, you guys can ask Max, all the other team. Like we're moving so fast right now in today's technical landscape that the the what do I want to say? The probability of error is increasing more and more and more with the amount of code that we're producing. It's kind of just like human nature. Like if I run in the street, more and more every day, that higher my chance of getting hit by a car. good analogy, but basically what I'm saying is in my industry, I've realized the weakness is governance and compliance because AI can hallucinate and produce risky code and production. So bam, that's the weakness of an AI industry. The other, of course, we talked about opportunities for growth is where, hey, I'm looking for a company that is pushing the boundaries of innovation right now. And if you're interested in an AI company, they're doing exactly that. So you don't really have to over explain. Every AI company is moving fast. They want self starters. They want people who don't have to. They want people who are autonomous over their work. So if you can communicate to them, hey, I'm hungry. You know, I've contributed in these open source projects. I've worked with open source models such as Hugging Face. Mistral 7B. I've worked with a bunch of like different open source models. I've show them that you're hungry and that you really want this, and that's really like the opportunity for growth. And you're showing them that, hey, I know you guys are growing and I'm growing too. Like I think we would be a match there. And then the third one would be like the threats. So in my case, threats would be uh, people building their own code review tool. Like why should people come to my company and like use our tool? Why don't they do it themselves? Why don't they build something in house? Like it's cheaper, right? Like I'm sure a lot of customers who come to us ask us, hey, why would we pay you $60 a month to use your tool? We can do that. We can just take our code, put it into Claude, and review code that way. You know, and I mean, I won't go too much into that answer because it's actually it's something that I talk about a lot with customers, and it's a really very long answer. But long story short is it's kind of like build versus buy. You know, do you really know how to build a tool like that? You almost want to, and this is not saying for you guys, but like you almost like for that third one, you want to let them know that I've identified threats to your company, and these threats are things that they most likely know themselves. Like the company already knows their threats, but if you both have the same common enemy, that's kind of what I'm trying to say. If you let them know that, like show them like, hey, like I'm on your side. Like these are our threats right now, and here's how we can get a leg up on them. If you go into an interview with that, their mind will be blown. I can assure you of that, because not every candidate is going into an interview thinking about their the other company's threats and their strengths and their weaknesses. Like they're thinking about, hey, I want to get this job so I can make a lot of money. And we do, like there's nothing wrong with that. But if you like take yourself out of your shoes, and that's going to be like the theme of this stream is like take yourself out of your shoes and put it like in the company's perspective. Like what is in it for them, you know like I know we're thinking about what's in it for us, but like they interviewed 10 people today. Like why should they hire you? And this is like what I just said, you should like probably write that down and like think about what why should they hire me compared to this person, compared to that person, compared to that person, and make a case for yourself. Don't like maybe get like, I haven't done this, I haven't had a lot of experience in my career yet, I haven't done a lot of projects yet. Maybe it's time for you to like start doing some projects and to start like do it like 100 days of code, do like 100 days of Python, build a website, build an API, and post it on LinkedIn. Like start posting your coding journey on LinkedIn, and engaging people with your brand. Everybody in this um, live stream has a brand, whether you know it or not. Everybody in this, and that's the one thing I want to highlight. Everybody in the stream has a superpower, and our goal is to help you realize your superpower in regard to the behavioral aspect. Like again, we're gonna make sure we're good with like the technical interview, but like you need to realize your strength in the behavioral aspect, and that will help you. That will help you get past like these final rounds of interviews, which is where a lot of people fail because it's either they lack experience, which is my thing. I didn't have experience when I was interviewing with a lot of these jobs because I graduated during COVID. I graduated in 2020. The world shut down. AI replaced my job in 2023. I was laid off because of all the AI, um, you know, integrations into teams. So if anybody can empathize with you, it's me, because I had to build projects. I had to become scrappy, you know, and kind of like, you know, I didn't really have anybody in my corner. Like I didn't have companies knocking down my door asking to hire me. You know, and a lot of people on this call don't have that either. So I think I can relate to a lot of you where if you feel like, hey, I'm just getting started, like I don't know what I'm doing yet. Nobody is reaching out to me. Recruiters aren't contacting me. Recruiters aren't replying to me. You're in the perfect space. I assure you that, because I same, you know, and now I'm not. Now you know I'm in a different space now where recruiters reach out to me. Recruiters, you know, want my business because I've shown at different companies I can bring value to those companies. So now they want me to go to their company, and that's what we're going to help you guys with, is like building up that foundation of you, not just you believing in yourself, but like you need something to show for it. So with these behavioral interviews, you need to have something tangible to show for it. And this is kind of me getting off of like a little bit off the track. Um, I think everybody should have one, and this is kind of like getting to a different plan, but like everybody should have one project ready to show on every interview. And depending on what interview, like you definitely want to use, you know, discernment to say, hey, I built this project, and it relates to this, you know, to your company in this way. You know, make sure the project is related to what they're doing. Don't just show them, you know, a cool mom and pop project. Make sure it's related to their current SWATs, and offer to show them it. I've I've seen a lot of success where maybe I wasn't the strongest in like my technical interview, because I till this day I don't know, I couldn't pass a single data structures and algorithms interview. I think out of all the, I stopped. It was actually so bad. I turned down companies that required that as an interview, as part of their interview process. So the interview used to, that they would reach out to me. They'll say, "Hey, we want you to interview with us. Here's the interview process." And I would ask them, "Hey, do you guys ask like data structures and algorithms types questions?" And they're like, "Yeah." I would ignore them because I was so bad at it. I didn't want to even have to deal with that. And so for you guys are a step ahead of me in that regard. So that's a good thing, because you guys are here in this cohort. You know, the team is helping you guys get ramped up on how to like pass these technical interviews, and that's, you're already a step ahead. I hope you guys realize like the value that they're providing. Make sure you practice these questions. Make sure you guys are like staying hungry, because this cohort is teaching you like not just how to solve these problems, but it's teaching you how to think. Like it's teaching you how to fish. Like we're not going to give you a fish. We're going to give you a fishing pole. We're going to give you a hook, and we're going to give you a worm, and we're going to let you do the fishing. We're going to teach you how to fish, but we're going to have to catch your own fish. So make sure you have a project or two related to that company's workflows, related to like what they care about, ready to demo on an interview. And that will, especially if that company is a smaller company, if they're, you know, they're not a FANG company, I wouldn't recommend showing that during FANG interviews. I know a lot of you are going after maybe FANG companies, but maybe this is another good, you know, topic to talk about, is like don't limit your horizon to just FANG related companies, because everything you're learning in this cohort related to like, you know, again, data structures and algorithms, linked lists, heaps, arrays, FANG related interviews are the top tier interviews. So like we have some top tier individuals on this team who are blessing you with their knowledge of how to get into those companies. And so when I was your, like if I was in your guys' shoes, I would be like every single day, like trying to like ping them, ask them questions. You know, I'm not, you know, I hope they're not listening to this, because I don't, I'm not trying to create more work on their end, but you know, they've worked at the top companies in this world, and not a lot of people have walked in their shoes before. I haven't walked in their shoes before. I haven't worked at, I mean, I've worked at, you know, two maybe top companies, but I haven't worked in a FANG company before. That's like that's in their own, they're in their own bag, you know, and that's just the respect. To be honest, like I didn't have it in me to like put in the work to practice data structures and algorithms. I actually went into more of a technical slash sales related role because I like talking to people. You know, I can code, I can build you a website in 5 hours. You know, I can build an API in 1 hour, but I can't traverse a binary tree in O of n squared time. You know, I don't, I, you know, I'm not passionate about doing that. But the fact that you guys are here, the fact that you guys are like, hungry, and you guys are actually like doing these lessons, you guys are like going throughout the cohort, take advantage of that and make sure that you keep practicing even after that. Because if you can pass those interviews, you can pass the smaller companies interviews like easily, especially like the technical interviews. That's going to be a walk in the park. And that's because, I'm not trying to like lower myself. That's because I passed it. Like I'm not the strongest coder, to be honest with you guys. Like I don't practice coding every day. Like again, I'm a solutions engineer. So I'm in a more sales role where I do some coding, but it's mostly like kind of like I'm a liaison between sales and engineering team. So I'm not the strongest coder, you know. There's sometimes like in a group chat where like the team is talking, I'm like, bro, like what are they talking about? You know? And if you feel that way, I'm in the same boat as you. Like don't feel like you're left out, no pun intended. But you just want to make sure that you're being diligent in this cohort, and like you're actually like putting in the work. You're not just doing like the exercises that we give you. You're putting in extra work. And what I'll do like inside of like Discord, and even like in the curriculum, provide external links to like free code camp, Khan Academy. I'm sure they have some like related resources. Geeks for Geeks. Like these are some good websites and tutorial based websites where you can like practice what we're learning and get some extra practice. I wish like I could take some questions. I don't have the ability to see the chat here, and I know we're getting close to the end of the stream, but so far we've covered 3 questions. I'll kind of go back over those 3. I think for each week we'll cover like 3 questions, and then I'll give, let me know how you guys feel about this. I think I kind of gave you guys a lot. I kind of, maybe I should have been more organized with how I presented this. So if you guys feel like this is maybe unorganized, or you guys prefer like a more structured stream, I can definitely fix that up. But I kind of wanted to give you guys some extra, like experience from what I've learned in interviews. You know, some extra tips, some extra things that you might not find on. You might find it on YouTube. You might find it in forums, but we have a lot of people in this community on this team who've worked at the best of the best of the best companies, and so utilize us as your resources. Feel free to reach out to me on Discord. I apologize, I haven't been too active yet because I am working full time at the moment. So after I'm done working, that's when I have time to kind of dedicate my time with you all. But I'm going to do better with being more being more present and like in Discord and like answering questions and things of that sorts. But yeah, next week we will. Oh no, first let me recap what we covered today, in case anybody missed it. So, tell me about yourself. That was the first question. We talked about the 3 S's: strength, success, and situation. Then we talked about, tell me about a time where something went wrong. You experienced it. You experienced some confrontation or a conflict with a coworker, or maybe not even with a coworker, but like something went wrong in a project. Because it's most likely going to be when something went wrong in a project. Like what went wrong in your personal project, what went wrong in a project at your past job. That they're going to ask you those type of questions. So you want to have that star response ready to go. And these are things that you practice in the mirror 2 to 3 weeks before your interview. If you have that amount of time, and even before you have an interview scheduled, you should have in your mind that I'm going to receive an interview soon. Like, I'm a strong believer in manifesting things. If you like carry yourself in a way that, hey, I'm going to receive an interview this year. It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but I know with the path I'm headed down, I will receive an interview. So put yourself in that frame right now and pretend that you have an interview on this date. I'm not going to say the date because you don't know either. Like, I don't know, you don't know, but you have an interview in your mind already. Like, start positioning your mind like that. And now that you know you have an interview coming up this year, how are you going to start preparing for that interview today? After this meeting or tomorrow. I know it's 4th of July weekend, so maybe you take this weekend to like reflect on what we've talked about. But you want to start preparing for these interviews as if you already have it scheduled, because even though I have a job already, I know the team has, they have work, I still practice these myself. And that's just so I can stay sharp and make sure I'm staying on top of, like, making sure I stay on top of my star responses, make sure I stay on top of my, 3 S's. So just to cover like the star responses: situation, task, assess, how did you assess that situation, and then the result. And then the third question is, tell me, like, what type of situation are you looking, or like what type of like company are you looking for? What are you looking for in your next role? That's what they're gonna ask. My apologies for. They're gonna ask you, like, what are you looking for in your next role? And again, that tied into that first 3 S's, where like the third one is the situation, but it's a totally different question because this is where we talked about SWOTs. So I know I'm giving a lot of acronyms, but these are things that I've years of research, like YouTube videos, Reddit, Glassdoor. Like, I had to learn these acronyms and practice these hundreds of times, and they work. I can promise you they work because, again, I am not a good coder. I am not the most technical person on this team. I am the least technical person on this team. I can assure you of that. And I was able to break in tech. So I know that if I was able to do it, I know everybody on this call can do it because, again, even if you were to ask me to sensitive, I would have to use AI to do that, But so yeah, the third one is yeah. So they ask you, tell me like what type of role you're looking for. Like, what's your ideal role? You tie that into their SWOTs, their strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities for growth, and then their threats at the moment. So that's pretty much what I had for today. Again, let me know if you guys, how you guys felt about this style of stream. Um, Again, if you guys like this kind of like freelance, kind of ping pong style, I can stick with it. That's kind of what I feel like I thrive in, but um, I can understand if you guys kind of want something a little bit more structured as well. So yeah, hope everybody has a good evening, and I'll catch you guys all later.